The story begins in the mysterious city of the future, S, a large-scale online game based on reality, and it completely simulates the real world. Haoji was asked to stop snoozing, as the open world is a city of the future, and the server opens in 10 minutes. The boy held his friend by the shoulder and urged him to wake up. Suddenly, the comrade stood up and grabbed Haoji's head with his hands, looking at him with a terrible gaze. He continued to hold him by the head and, calling him a scoundrel, said that he really betrayed him. He wondered if he was dreaming or had lost his bearings. He asked to be let go immediately, as it was already completely impossible to breathe. Haoji asked Lehigh why he was the one, and the boy replied that if not him, then who was he thinking of? Haoji laughed and exclaimed that he was really dead and continued to hold his head with his hands and smiled. Finally, their brothers meet in heaven. He never did what he asked him to do before his death, and the boy apologized to his friend. Lehigh replied that he was cursing him, and that heaven and hell had nothing to do with it. He asked him to quickly wipe away the drool and get ready to log in as a pioneer. He asked why the boy was chuckling, because this game had more than 50 million upon registration, and if he was too slow, he would wait in line until he died. The boy grabbed the computer mouse and started clicking. The open world, specifically the city of the future, began loading. Haoji wondered what was going on. Lehigh replied that he'd already told him to take a few days off and not work the night shift. Otherwise, he was looking so tired. He'd definitely help him with the computer. Haoji wondered again if Lisa had finished him off. His eyes glowed a deep red. He started calling Lisa and said that the dragon's bloodstone would definitely be his. Suddenly, the boy's gaze changed and scarlet streams of blood began to flow from his mouth. The woman he trusted most killed him near the Sea of Giants while closing the dragonstone. He asked what year it was, and Lehigh told Haoji it was 2024, and he'd been extremely tired and distracted lately. This simply couldn't go on, and the boy immediately thought about what had happened 10 years ago. Lehigh asked him to wait a couple of minutes and first log in, and then he would go to sleep. The first 100 people to log in will receive an orange gift set to celebrate the server's launch. They can then sell the set's equipment for money to cover his sister's medical bills. He asked his comrade not to think about anything, but just focus on speed, and Haoji understood him by closing his eyes. What a surprise to be reborn 10 years ago. 10 minutes before the opening of the server of the future City S, Lehigh is still alive, as is his sister. He told his friend that in his past life he couldn't repay him for everything, but in this one, he would definitely rewrite their destinies. Lehigh replied that he didn't know what he saw in the dream, but he liked his words. All the money from his gift set would be his, and as long as their sister was alive, it wasn't worth it. Haoji closed his eyes again and agreed with his comrade. He didn't yet know what would happen in a few minutes. The system welcomed the boy into the open world of the future City S. He is the 99th player to enter the game, and the system congratulated him. Lehigh asked his friend what his number was, and he said it was 99. The boy exclaimed that it was simply superb, and that he'd paid so much money for the internet upgrade, but it turns out he was the 65th person to log into the game. He raised his hand and, laughing, said they were both lucky. But why did the electricity go out at such a crucial moment? Now they won't have to wait in line again. And then the boy received a signal that the game would soon officially begin. Lehigh was sitting in front of the computer monitor, and the system asked him to name his character. He reached his finger to the screen and clicked on the Platinum Hunter. He was very surprised and exclaimed that this was simply unbelievable in what was happening. He asked Haoji if he could see it and quickly rose from his chair. Future City S is an unusual online game, simulating reality. It replaces it and becomes it, a fact he spent a long time getting used to in his previous life. The boy couldn't see his game, but he also had a panel. What kind of technology is this? And there was no external equipment, which is very cool. After the game launches, reality will soon be completely replaced. Eventually, the entire world will become game-like, and all of humanity will be immersed in the future city of S. The system offered to read basic information about the city. After reading, they would receive a mysterious gift set. Lehigh exclaimed, "This is very exciting and worth jumping into the game right now for the fun." Haoji urged his companion not to miss the key information. He thought to himself that he couldn't tell him that he had been reborn and that he needed to warn him about it first. He asked Lehigh to respect the carefully written information and read it in its entirety. His comrade asked him what he had said. Haoji asked him to forget it and exclaimed that they would see each other later. In his previous life, he learned from the Dark Lord that by reading every word of the million-word core information, a special talent skill would be unlocked before entering the game. In the previous life, according to some sources, less than 10 people in the entire world discovered talents of great rank. And he, whose speed of movement was even faster than Lehigh's, could only rely on diligently farming monsters, leveling up and obtaining equipment. Having apologized, he thought about the fact that it was only 1,000,000 words and clenched his strong fist. The first rule stated that the wealth equivalent depends on the principle that upon entering the game, it is distributed 1-to-1 from the wealth in reality. Rule number 2. Everyone has one resurrection skill. Dying twice in the game means permanent offline status. The boy continued to poke at the monitor screen and get acquainted with many more rules. Many hours and 3 days had already passed since he had been sitting, engrossed in front of the screen, and had finally read all the information. With the coming of the apocalypse, may the stars be with him, reading has been completed and it is time to log into the game. The Platinum Hunter was supposed to choose a race and class, and the boy was already plummeting somewhere, as if into an abyss. Because he possessed a dragon's bloodstone, he awakened as a member of the hidden dragon race, level 1, and received a high-ranking restoration talent. Haoji was surprised when he heard about the Dragonstone, and didn't Lisa take it? Why does the second talent have a question mark? Character and system information is working. The system asked me to check it after logging in and enjoy the game. Suddenly the boy felt someone's breath behind him and a hand fell on his shoulder. A comrade asked him why he had just arrived, and said that he was already at level 5. Lehigh explained that the newbie village was phenomenally well done, just like in the real world. He still couldn't figure out how to log out of the game, and it felt like he'd been transported there. His name is Haoji, and if he remembers correctly, he's 24 years old. At that time, he had to work a day job and work part-time at night. To save money, he shared a small apartment with Lehigh in the third ring. The woman approached Wutong and asked how she was feeling today, to which she replied that she was fine. At the time, he was busy earning money to pay for her treatment, and was rarely around her. In his previous life, he was forced to participate in the world to provide his sister with better medical care. Afterward, when the game replaced reality, he became a legendary Platinum Hunter. He collected money, bought his sister new medications, allowed her to move to hospitals with better conditions, but she could not bear the deterioration of her condition and chose suicide. The boy stood before the gravestone looking at it sadly. After his sister's death, he'd accidentally spotted a special cure for Charcot's disease in a hardware store, which cost 500 points. The comrade asked his friend what he was thinking about. Haoji, sweating beatingly, replied that he was thinking nothing of the sort, only that his sister's illness was racing through his mind. Lehigh said that if he missed her, they could stop by the hospital and talk to her. Incidentally, the points can be exchanged for cash, and soon their little sister will be in a private room. Lehigh suddenly exclaimed that he had a mission and time to complete it. He asked them to pay special attention to the clues, otherwise they would pay dearly for failure. He needed to level up quickly, otherwise they were far from the shared missions and he had to run. As they parted, he told them they'd meet at McDonald's at 8 o'clock, and the main thing was not to miss the opportunity. Meanwhile, the boys walked along the road, holding hands. One was holding a girl's hand, another their child's. The boy thought that this boy's talent lay in games. He no longer needed them and was able to move on with his life. One of the people on the road mentioned that more and more people have been doing cosplay lately, and her grandson is into it too. The woman replied that it's called cosplay, and that it's a foreign influence. Then the grandmother agreed and asked if it was really some kind of event since the streets were full of dressed-up young people. The mission's objective this time was a gathering near the northern gate of Chenyu's Happy Valley. The mission lasted only 30 minutes, and the reward was a few points. Failure of a mission also carries a penalty of several points. But if the points drop to 20, the account will be closed. Haoji listened to the new requirements of the system and began to move around the train station. The boy sat down on a seat in the commuter train and read the news about the sudden destruction of roads in the new Chenfu zone. He read about a horrific, anomalous accident that had occurred in Anhui. According to witnesses, a tall building in the city center had mysteriously disappeared around 1 p.m. for several hours. Almost all the employees were missing, and their whereabouts unknown. Police arrived on the scene, and virtual reality and reality gradually began to merge. The boy wondered if there were others who had been reborn like him, those who already knew what they were facing. He glanced at the girl and she seemed very familiar. Suddenly the girl noticed that the guy sitting next to her looked at her. When he asked if she knew him, the girl called him by name. Haoji was very surprised by this and became curious about how they knew each other. The girl explained that they had met 3 days ago at the hospital and that her name was Yin Pei. She said she was Wutong's best friend. Unexpectedly, when the guy heard this, he cast a strange, surprised look at her. Yin Pei looked at him and asked why Wutong committed suicide and what if there was a special medicine. She was very sad and the girl closed her eyes and pressed herself against the boy. Haoji, clutching his head, told Yin Pei he'd screwed up and apologized for it. He thought to himself that he'd actually met Yin Pei's sister's best friend before, but he'd never seen her so young and lively. Yin Pei said that everything was fine, and they hadn't seen each other that many times, and it was normal that he didn't recognize her right away. Wutong once proudly introduced Yin Pei to him as her best student. Beautiful, kind, and righteous. She has won 3 Bajiquan championships and often fights for justice. To put it bluntly, Wutong is the perfect goddess. Yin Pei asked Haoji why he wasn't at work or if he was currently on leave. The boy replied that he was indeed on leave. The girl asked him at what station he would be getting off, and the boy replied that it was at Zihua Avenue. Then she cast a surprised glance at Haoji and exclaimed that she did too, and that it was a big coincidence. The boy looked at her again with a surprised look and immediately turned it to the side. He asked the girl if she had entered the city of the future S, and then she looked at him questioningly. Suddenly, she changed the subject and asked if he saw the same floating blue screen as she did. Haoji thought about how in his previous life, after the game had completely replaced reality, Yinpei had been alive. She was bound to enter the game one way or another. He just didn't expect that she would be one of the first. Yinpei said that during an interview at the company this morning, this screen suddenly appeared along with a request to view the game's plot. She thought she was imagining things, and that meant it really was advanced technology. The boy asked if she'd watched the segment, to which she replied, laughing that she'd missed it all. Anyway, she'd recently gotten a mission, so she'd taken the subway. This is the first time she has encountered something like this, and she also thought that it would be better to do as told, otherwise points would be deducted. What if this is real and this is how science fiction works? The next stop was Jihua Avenue, and the kids were asked to leave the train on the left side. The girl immediately stood up, and Haoji told her that no problem, because he probably had the same mission as her. Since everything turned out this way, the guys decided to go together and got off the train. The system reported that the mission was completed and the reward for it was 1 point, and the character's level was also first. The boy asked the girl if she knew that they were already in the game. She couldn't understand where they were now and began to look closely at the people around her. Besides this, in other words, it cannot be explained in any way, and they continued to be surprised. Haoji closed his eyes and said that since this is a game, it has its own rules, and those who follow the rules can win. The very next moment, one of the boys inquired what was going on and exclaimed that he'd come here in response to a call, and he still had work to do. Who would pay the fine for his absence, and was this really another test for the capitalists? He started calling out and asking if anyone could hear him. Another man said that this was definitely true and that it was clearly a test of the capitalists. Who do they take these ordinary people for? And don't they think such technologies are scary? How can any of them even see the scoreboard in front of them? When exactly was it installed, and was it really after the vaccination? One of the guys asked if there were any staff around and asked for an immediate explanation. Which company is conducting this trial, and is it large scale? Does the government have official documentation, and who will compensate for its losses? Yinpei turned towards the protagonist and wanted to say something, but the boy unexpectedly took her hand, after which they continued to watch what was happening. Haoji turned to the girl and asked her not to act unnecessarily, but she asked the main character if they needed to explain everything they knew about it. In front of them, there was a bunch of idiots, and the guys couldn't understand what was happening. Some fair-haired guy laughed and looked at them with a stupid smile. Even though the situation is unclear, something funny happens. Suddenly, someone exclaims that a murder has occurred. Horrible screams were heard all around, and one of the guys was torn into small pieces. People didn't understand what had happened, and the guy who was wearing glasses fell to the ground, hitting his back and bleeding. The guys gathered around this guy who was in a pool of scarlet blood and looked at him with fear. The system congratulated the guys on coming to this game, and they looked with fear at the dead body lying in front of them. The system reported that all participants in this mission are newcomers, and to help them adapt faster, a special service has just been prepared for everyone. This is the preferred attitude to ensure that everyone takes the game seriously. Yinpei covered her mouth with her hands, and the boy asked her to calm down, but the girl explained that someone had died, to which the boy replied that people die, and many will die. He asked her to get used to this fact quickly, and privately thought that she quickly realized she was in a game. However, such a furor can destroy anyone's worldview, and he had had to get used to it for a long time in his previous life. Now she must understand that this game is not entertainment, and that those who control the game do not value life and are devoid of humanity. The main character looked closely at the sign that was in front of him, and it was as if an explosion had occurred. People began to lose their balance and fly off in different directions, falling down. The boy grabbed Yinpei's hand and began to hold her shoulder with his other hand. There was another explosion and a bright purple flash spread around. Everything was enveloped in purple light, and the Ferris wheel glowed like gold. The system informed them that their mission was to survive. The mission type was weekly, and the duration was 1 hour. The difficulty was level 1, and the reward for the mission was 5 points. The penalty for failing the mission was that the Valley of Happiness staff would harass the tourists. Will they hide or resist, and how will they survive? The system announced that the game was beginning. When the system informed the boys that the game was starting, everyone looked around in horror. One of the guys asked if it was just a hoax, just to scare them. But one of the men replied that it all seemed real. How could killing people on the street be a hoax? He asked him to wake up. Yinpei approached the protagonist and, frightened, called him by name. Haoji asked her to leave, as standing at the entrance could be considered a violation of the rules. When the boy said this, the girl immediately agreed and, clasping her hands in front of her, followed him. The boy stood in front of the high gates and asked to open them immediately and let them in. One of the guys asked the ticket inspectors if they were deaf. The second one asked why I couldn't keep quiet or if their brains had stopped working. Yinpei also wanted to say something and go forward, but the boy immediately stopped her with one movement of his hand. He was very cautious and cast a questioning glance, peering into the distance. There were only 3 employees near the entrance. The game is designed for level 1 players. I can solve everything. It sounds easy. The girl said that the screen said that the employees of the Valley of Happiness would hunt tourists. She explained to the protagonist that they had clearly been given hints. How'd you notice that the girl was quite calm? One man was very angry and asked the guy standing in front of the gate to open the door because how would they play if he stood there like a statue? Those who guarded this gate bowed their heads down and began to approach the boys. When they raised their heads, their mouths were sewn up with threads and their eyes glowed with a white transparent light. The man was simply shocked and, covered in beads of sweat, asked what happened to their eyes. The boys looked closely at these terrible people and could not understand what had happened to them. The man continued shouting again and asked them to be careful as he promised to file a complaint. The other boys thought they had accomplished the task, but one of the girls with a scary face directed all her strength towards the man. There was a flash and she jumped up and approached him, thrusting a sharp weapon into his eye. She jumped high above him, and after the man fell to the floor without an eye, she jumped on him. She hit the man with all her might, and blood started spraying in all directions. The creepy woman again raised the sharp weapon as high as she could and began to gouge out the man's eye. She smiled evilly and her eye flew high above the heads of the other boys. It was a terrifying sight, and one of the participants exclaimed that a murder had occurred. Another said that the officers were killing people. The guys started running in all directions, and one of them asked to call the police as soon as possible. They continued to run away and call for help, but the officers continued to chase them. The employees' eyes were bloody and they were very fast and dexterous. People continued to scream and call for help, saying they were being killed and maimed. One of the girls begged for help and asked to be released quickly. The guy holding the gun laughed and said it was funny. He explained that they were just employees and that killing them wasn't illegal, but he became curious about where the law was and he gripped his weapon even tighter. When the woman had dealt with that man, she began to approach the guy who was holding the blade in his hands. He called her baby and exclaimed that she loved rough play, so her big brother would play hard with her today. Before he could finish speaking, the creepy woman was already approaching him with sharp, bared claws. The guy hit her on the head with his sharp weapon and exclaimed that it was very hot and that he liked her. He asked permission to entertain her. The boy asked how his older brother's steel rod tasted. He asked her to cry out, "Brother, it hurts me twice," and then he'll have mercy on her. When he finished off this terrible woman, he asked if she had completely lost her tongue. The guy was very angry and the system congratulated the player, since it had been a long time since he had been an older brother, for killing the first humanoid monster in the game city of the Future S. The system rewards the player who hasn't been an older brother for a long time with 100 experience points, and the character's level was first. The guy was very happy and laughed and exclaimed that this was a real game, and that you get experience points for killing monsters. He became very interested, and without letting go of his weapon, he decided to continue the fight against the monsters. The protagonist looked at Yinpei and asked her to discuss strategy. She asked what strategy he was talking about. Some girl sat down next to the boy and asked him to speak quickly. What kind of strategy was this? The main character looked at her carefully with a stern look, drawing his eyebrows towards his nose and asked who she was. The girl looked calmly at the boy and said that her name was He Nina. Then both Haoji and Yinpei looked at her thoughtfully in response. She asked the main character with a sad look what their strategy was. Then the boy, looking out from around the corner, explained to the girls that, to begin with, this was an observation. He thought to himself that it was useless to be reckless, even though they were only first-tier monsters. An attack by the majority has a direct effect. There are about 200 employees in the entire amusement park. Some physically fit, others just ordinary people. He watched as the staff killed the participants, cutting them into small pieces. Yinpei is a Bajikwan competition champion, so self-defense is not a problem. The protagonist asked the girl if she could fight. Hanina replied that she could in video games. The boy explained that there were piles of dead bodies outside and a lot of blood everywhere. He asked the girls to listen carefully to what he was about to say. He began to explain that, in addition to the rules of the game shown on the screen, killing these individuals, namely park employees, gives experience points for leveling up. Yinpei asked if he meant to say they were originally human. She was afraid they wouldn't be able to kill them without a reason. Haoji said that he would not force her to actively kill people. There were many other ways to gain experience points. However, if she were to be struck, she would have to reciprocate. Hinina smiled and clenched her fist. The boy explained that killing non-player characters was different from killing monsters in computer games, and asked if they understood everything. Hinina replied that she didn't want to die or be a burden yet, so there was no need to worry about her. Yinpei exclaimed that she wouldn't be a burden either. Then the boy approached both girls and, taking them by the heads with his hands, said that then it would be so. Haoji looked around and told the girls to wait for him first. He would go to the carousel and check it for any improvised weapons. He explained, pointing to the boxes, that it was safe to be here for now and there was no need to reveal oneself. Meanwhile, the girls actually climbed into the boxes and sat there quietly, not sticking their heads out. The main character slowly crawled out of hiding and tried to listen to different sounds. He tried to get past the employees and reached into the drawer with one hand. Suddenly, one of the employees appeared behind him and began to stretch out her vile paw with claws towards him. The girls pulled their heads out of the box and, worried about the boy, asked him to be careful. But the employee, having already approached him, tried to turn him over onto the ground. The boy did a somersault and she began to approach again, smiling slyly at him. She stood up and arched her back in a very terrifying manner, and her claws were long and curved. She prepared to jump and get closer to the enemy. Haoji said that he originally didn't want Yunpei to see him kill with her own eyes, but he wanted to consider it a lesson for her. The boy started using the key against the employee and she flew far, far away. The protagonist realized that this body's physical fitness was poor and he needed to prepare. When he stopped, he felt cramps in his legs, which was not very good. This was the first person he killed after rebirth, and yet, just recently, these were people. Unfortunately, this is fate. But he will surely survive and take revenge on everyone. As a reward, he received a huge iron hammer and a special wrench. Haoji, after receiving these items, appeared next to the girls and said that he had already returned and was here. He gave these items to the girls for self-defense and took a huge, heavy hammer for himself. Yunpei asked Brother Haoji if he was injured out of fear for the protagonist. The boy told the girls he was fine and had no wounds. Yunpei remarked that Wu Tong hadn't said he knew martial arts. Haoji replied that he wasn't completely versed and that he had twisted his ankle while falling. The boy thought to himself that Yunpei knew Bajikwan. At first glance, it was clear to her who had trained and who had not. But for now, he won't tell anyone he was reincarnated, and that will be his ace in the hole. Besides, he's not lying, and his physical fitness is truly terrible. He really did twist his ankle. Suddenly, the girl looked at Haoji with fear and said that his smile was a little scary. Nina looked at him with tears in her eyes and said that he looked like an experienced killer. The protagonist replied that experienced killers, people with an instinct for self-preservation, knew better that this was a special situation. The girl asked if they would now go out to earn points. Haoji replied that it wasn't necessary and that if they followed the game rules and survived for an hour, the system would reward them with points. He explained, looking at his watch, that they could exchange points for experience, but it was not cheap and there were only 39 minutes left. Nina told the boy she knew they were game characters and promised not to be a burden. She wanted to continue, but Yunpei asked if they could level up if they didn't kill the characters. If they don't level up while surviving this round, then they'll be stuck in the next ones. While the girls were discussing, the main character looked ahead and grinned. There were a lot of corpses lying on the ground, and he became curious about why such a cruel game even existed. The guy who first killed the employee continued to fight for his life and kill them one after another. He did it with great passion and his eyes shone with joy. When he killed a coworker, he laughed very viciously and rudely. The guy never let go of his axe and called the game very refreshing. He noticed that the air was filled with the scent of screams and fear, as if enjoying it. A parade of blood unfolded before his eyes and he considered himself the chosen one. He raised his bloody cleaver high above his head and exclaimed that this was exactly what he had been waiting for. He wanted to come to a new world and he likes it. The other guys hearing this were seriously scared. Meanwhile, the men sat near the screens watching the proceedings intently. When they started talking about dodging and using skills, the game was over. One of the guys asked the other if he even knew how to play. Was he cheating, and why wasn't his health decreasing? When the guy called him trash, the second one came up and grabbed him, asking who he was to call him trash. But the boy asked to be let go, and he kept asking who he was calling trash. It was just a few curse words. No need to make a mountain out of a molehill. It's impossible not to swear while gaming, and besides, his gameplay is terrible. The guy mentioned that he was constantly called trash and asked what the big deal was, whether they were playing or not, and if not, then it was better to end it. But the guy hit him in the face with all his might and said that if he couldn't win the game, he'd start fighting people. And if he can't handle it, he asked him to just stop playing around and call him trash again. Meanwhile, the beaten guy was on a bench in front of the police. He was very angry and thought to himself that they considered him trash too. The girl slapped him across the cheek. Was she really working 2 jobs to pay for his education, constantly giving him chances while he continued to humiliate himself instead? The woman called him just trash and said that he was the same as his father and that she was definitely cursed. After these events, the guy kept his word and waited for the day when fate would finally rejoice. Now he held the cleaver in his hands and was already gaining more and more experience. He decided he needed to kill 13 more characters to reach level 4. There was still half an hour left in the game, and competing with other players for points wasn't the best strategy. He decided that the rules did not explain the penalty for killing people, since it was not written in them and there was no punishment as such. The amusement park is crowded, so it's important to level up a couple of times before leaving the rookie village. He decided they would die in the next game anyway, if not this one, and that was a huge advantage. He was already chasing the girl who was running away from him, screaming for help. She continued to call for help, but the guy had already approached her waving his cleaver. He killed one of the guys again and received 100 experience points heading towards a new victim. The girl turned her head in his direction with fear and began to run away as quickly as possible. The guy held a cleaver and then looked at her with a creepy, angry look. The girl was seriously scared and wanted to scream, but he covered her mouth with his hand. He asked her not to scream and asked if she was afraid of setting the employees on herself. Then she started crying. and became silent, after which she thanked him for his help. She continued to cry and said that if it weren't for him, she would have been dead a long time ago. The boy replied that there was no need to thank him. He asked if she was a player and whether she was human. The girl, wiping tears from her eyes, looked at him attentively and said that she was a player. Well, when he came closer and closer to her, she looked at him in fear and asked him to save her. Suddenly, the guy raised his axe over her head, and she became very scared. The guy laughed terribly and decided to see what she was worth and chopped her up with an axe. He cut the girl into small pieces and was very pleased with what was happening. But unexpectedly, the system revealed that he had been deducted 1 point for killing a representative of his own race. The guy smiled and said he was unlucky today. Following that logic, killing members of the demon and beast races was perfectly fine, but wouldn't he lose his points? It was noticeable when the guy pressed search that the initial conditions and introduction to the game were gone. Since the level of this newbie village is low, it might be a good idea to check a few things. You should have carefully read the game's plot and the associated conditions at the very beginning. However, the text was jumbled together, so he didn't read it all. Suddenly, the boy's eyes changed when he saw the 2 girls and the main character in front of him. He smiled sarcastically and said that there were 3 cowards in front of him and laughed. He made his way behind the boys very quietly and carefully, not letting go of his bloody cleaver. Suddenly, he found himself in front of the guys and, having greeted them, showed them his weapon. He squatted down and, smiling, asked if they had been hiding here all this time. The girl grunted in response and said nothing. But that makes sense because this place is out of sight and a pretty nice spot. And safe too. The main character looked at the guy with the gun and asked what he could do for him. Then the guy explained to Hao Ji that it was too dangerous outside and he was also looking for a safe place. The boy wondered what kind of safe place he was talking about. He was covered in blood, holding 2 butcher knives, and he needed to hide. The boy wondered if the kid was constantly checking him out, wondering if he was some kind of experienced player. But this was the look of a newbie village, and he was probably overthinking things. He asked if there were any tips. Hao Ji replied that he had no advice, that he was covered in blood, and that it wasn't because he'd stumbled into danger. Killing opposing factions would become normal in the late game, and this man looked fine, so it was best not to mess with him. The boy said that fortunately he was quick and immediately ran to the restaurant to get a weapon for self-defense. The guy smiled slyly at the guys again and asked if they were all people. Yinpei looked at the boy carefully and asked in response what the point of this question was. Then the guy explained that if they were all of the same race, they should help each other. He explained that it was extremely dangerous outside and asked if they thought the same as he did. For some reason, Hanina looked at him with a certain fear. The guy explained that, of course, everyone is human, and naturally they should help each other. However, 3 of them were too weak and planned to hide here until the end of the game. Then the man with the cleaver said that if they waited, they wouldn't be able to level up here and that future games would be difficult. The protagonist asked if there were any players playing games who preferred to hide. Then the guy with the cleaver said it was true and that outright murder required overcoming a psychological barrier. After all, they were all human. He thought to himself that this little girl had been acting timid the whole time he had been asking questions, and that something was wrong here. Nevertheless, he advises them to think more broadly, because the world as he sees it is about to change completely. Only the strongest will survive, and they don't want to kill. He clutched his weapon and asked the girl with her head down if she belonged to the human race. The main character asked to leave the self-presentation until the end of this whole game. He looked closely at the fair-haired guy and thought that he was not thinking about killing people. He'd seen that look countless times, and it was clearly aimed at He Ning. However, only interracial murders earned points, while killing someone of the same race meant they were deducted. Hao Ji thought that this guy was definitely a killer of his own race. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked about their race. He told the guy that the 3 of them were hiding in the games and that they just needed to survive until the end. The boy decided to test something. It's easy to extract information from people with such eccentric personalities. He said they all saw what happened before the game started. If they didn't play by the rules, they would be considered violators and then killed. And if they don't hunt employees to level up, what will they do if it's impossible to hide in the game? Honestly, he's already level 3, and killing employees doesn't take much effort. He asked them to follow him because there's strength in numbers. He'd even let them kill a couple of his employees for extra points, and that would be quite nice. Hao Ji apologized, saying he preferred going solo. He thought to himself that a new player who had reached level 3 in less than an hour was either exceptional beyond belief. Bringing such a person into the team seemed to genuinely increase their chances of survival. But after his previous life, especially after Lisa's betrayal, he wouldn't make that choice. The guy laughed and exclaimed that it was a huge pity. He liked them and even wanted to be friends with them. Yinpei walked up to the main character and pointed her finger forward, exclaiming that things were bad. The guy walked forward and felt a multitude of scoundrels with weapons behind him. There was a huge giant panda in their head, and the monsters were already approaching him. Then the fair-haired guy said that since they were not working together, he would have to strike first. The guy raised his sharp axe as high as he could above his head and decided to strike. The main character dodged back in time, and the rest of the monsters began to approach them faster and faster. They surrounded the boys from all sides and began to release their evil, long, sharp claws. The fair-haired man noticed that Haoji was very good at dodging and approached him again. The boy realized, looking at his opponent, that he did it on purpose and called him crazy. The guy exclaimed that people can't kill people, but if it's not a direct hunt, then no points are counted. He asked if he was speaking correctly, and again began waving his cleaver over the protagonist's head. The boy thought, looking at the scoundrel, that if he died, then problems would be inevitable. The masks have fallen off, and if they don't die right now, won't this lead to a dangerous outcome? The monsters were approaching faster and faster, and the blonde guy developed the disease of madness. He started swinging his knife at the huge, menacing bear, and did he just use a skill? A really blonde guy just used his powers and exclaimed that he was so cool. He turned to the main character and said that he was very lucky because the master was ready to play. He laughed, grabbed his cleaver, and exclaimed as he approached the monsters that this skill was really awesome. The staff were very surprised when the guy started using the madness disease. He exclaimed, waving a cleaver, that it suited his character perfectly and that he was going crazy. Meanwhile, Haoji grabbed his girlfriends by the hands and asked them to run away immediately. The blonde man laughed very loudly and told the monsters that appeared in front of him that he would gut them later. Meanwhile, the main character and the girls found themselves in some corridor. The boy explained that there were supposed to be employees in the electrical room and asked them to be quiet. Hinina grabbed his sleeve and said she wanted to help him. She explained that she wanted to try and she didn't want to burden others. The boy immediately grinned in response and looked at her carefully. He looked at her with a surprised, questioning look, and a mouse sat on her hand. She looked closely at this mouse, bringing it closer to her face, and the mouse also looked into her eyes. Hanina suddenly let go of the mouse and it ran forward somewhere. Yinpei asked the girl if she could communicate with animals. Haoji also asked if her ability really was to control animals. The girl replied that it was probably because she chose animals. Upon entering the amusement park, she immediately began to understand how to control the animals. A small flower would help them explore the control room. Haoji thought that the beast's obvious characteristics had not yet manifested, and that when it reached level 10, the corresponding features would appear. The boy explained that she had seen the situation with her own eyes. Legal restrictions would gradually disappear, and more people like that madman would appear. Off-screen, there will also be situations where they might kill each other, and they'll need to be able to stand up for themselves. The girls grabbed their weapons again and said they understood. Meanwhile, two monsters appeared behind them. Hanina explained that the little flower was saying there were two employees in the office inside the control room. Yinpei asked the protagonist if they were truly no longer human. Haoji asked him not to force himself and said he could handle it himself. He said he would. Hinina picked up a large wrench and, sweating a little, pressed it to herself. The girls ran together to the huge door that was in front of them, and the boy looked after them. He wondered for a moment whether he was asking too much of them as he watched them go. The girls had already slowly approached the huge door, and Hinina looked at Yinpei with fear. She blushed slightly, covered in beads of sweat, and grinned as she looked carefully at the door. After which Yinpei also approached the door and began to slowly open it. Looking inside, they saw in front of them two employees who had no weapons, and their backs turned to them. They grabbed their hammers, and the girl thought that they were not people at all, repeating this over and over again. The protagonist told Yinpei that in this world, the strongest have always survived, while the weak struggle to survive, finding themselves at the very bottom of society. In his previous life, he didn't meet her right away. However, she tried hard to survive alone. He believes that she is clearly not the type known for indecision or doubt. Yinpei began to approach one of the opponents and, rising above his head, struck him with all her might with a hammer. Then she swung again and tried to deliver a powerful blow to the enemy. He also cast an angry, empty glance at her and approached her hand. But the girl was the first to clench her fist, and her hammer flew high above her head. Throwing aside her hammer, she approached her opponent as quickly as possible and hit him with her elbow in the chest with all her might. There was a golden flash and the man flew far back. The wrench flew toward the second enemy and knocked out a tooth. Sharp claws protruded from this vicious monster. Hinina told Sister Yinpei that she would help her and started waving her key. The main character appeared unexpectedly and looked intently at a whole flock of mice in front of him. It was a very creepy sight, and many huge rats were shining in the darkness with their red, evil eyes. They began to approach their opponents and attack them, devouring them piece by piece. Yinpei clenched her fists and glowed with bright golden rays. She began to use her abilities, and blood gushed from the enemy's mouth. She hit the enemy right in the evil heart, and he began to cough up blood more and more. The girl remained standing with clenched fists, and she was very strong in this fight. Hinina also killed one of the employees, and they remained near these bodies. Both girls received reward points and were very surprised by these experience points. Yinpei suddenly sat down on the floor, clutching her chest and looking in surprise at the man lying on the floor. She was very surprised that she had killed him. Hinina approached the mouse and leaned down to pet it. She immediately thanked him for his help. The main character approached the girls and announced that there were 15 minutes left until the end of the game. This is a new world, a treacherous apocalypse rife with murder. The boy asked if they would stay here or come with him. His briefing ends here and they should know what to do next. For now, he has some work to do. Yunpei looked at the protagonist with a stern gaze and exclaimed that she would go with him. Nina was also confident and replied to Haoqi that she would also go with him. The boy thought that Nina's ability was extremely important since she decided to hide here. He could stop protecting her. However, with her determination, helping someone like her develop is worth it, and they could even become family. Then the boy extended his hand forward and they all touched hands, deciding to stick together. Meanwhile, the same events continued on the street and the fair-haired guy continued to kill employees. He was already standing next to the girl's body and holding a sharp cleaver that was covered in streaks of scarlet blood. The guy thought about how hard it would be to keep up with the other guys, given his build. He'd killed more than 10 people and was very tired. Points can be exchanged for items to enhance the constitution, and there are only 10 minutes left until the end, and he hasn't had time to have fun yet. Could it be that the mice ran out of their hiding place, and in that case the cat cannot miss such prey? The main character and his assistants were already on the street and fighting off the evil, lousy monsters that were attacking them. One of the evil villains had already approached Haoji and wanted to hit him with a cleaver, but the boy was very agile and, dodging the blow, hit him on the head with all his might. Two more guys approached Yunpei, revealing their sharp, cold swords. But the girl grabbed a metal wrench and swung it over her opponent's head. One of them flew far back as the girl very deftly hit him on the head. She decided to finish him off and started hitting him on the head with all her might to make sure. Nina also dealt well with her opponents thanks to her ability to communicate with animals. The girl set a lot of predatory, vicious dogs on the villains, who screamed in pain when the dogs sank their fangs into their necks. Haoji said that as the level rises, future stages of the game with monsters will correspondingly become more difficult and generally 1 or 2 levels higher than theirs. Haoji said that this amusement park is a tutorial. The employees are demarcated and they will consider this mercy on the part of the developers. Nina smiled and said he knew a lot. The boy explained that he played games, and the mechanics and rules followed the same principles regardless. And there are only about 200 employees in the entire amusement park, and killing them all equals 10,000 experience points, and the highest level is 10. Reaching that level is a waste of resources in the newbie village. In a previous life, many discovered only mid-game that defending others, especially ordinary unarmed people, yielded additional experience points. The problem is, after the mid-game, the difficulty of earning experience points becomes astronomical. If you immediately become a top player at the start of the game, the possibilities are extremely varied, which is unacceptable for other players. If only he had carefully read the game's plot in his previous life, a hero literally means someone whose job it is to save others and save the world. How ridiculous considering the game that forces you to kill, yet simultaneously aims to select heroes. He told the girls they already knew how to hunt employees and that the next thing he was about to tell them was something they should remember. Most players are saviors of the world, which implies helping the weak. He'll try to explain it clearly and concisely without any ambiguity. Killing employees gives experience points, but the subtext is clearly about saving people. The mission description also hints at this, with the staff of the Valley of Happiness hunting for tourists. Will they hide or fight back? And how will they survive? Who's asking how they'll survive without being forced to do anything? So how exactly they survive is their own choice. He can protect them during the game, but there will definitely be games in the future where he won't be on their side, and they need to develop quickly. Something else, and that's directly killing one's own race, for which points are deducted. Killing other races doesn't add or subtract points. He didn't have time to explain why, so he simply asked her to remember the outcome. Yunpei told the boy that she understood everything. Nina said that she also trusted his judgment. And so the main character grabbed his weapon and began to rush towards his opponents, calling the girls to follow him. On the way, he hit one after another and asked them not to hang around, but to run forward rather. The girls were no slouch either, and they hit one after another with their fists, harder and harder. The animals continued to bite the necks of their opponents, and they screamed in horror and pain as they bled. The boys continued to fight against their evil opponents when suddenly a man began to approach them. He exclaimed that it was quite impressive and that he thought they were hiding there without ever leaving cover. He was level 6 and had 5 1,600 experience points. The blonde-haired man explained with a smile that he had been watching them for some time. He asked Nina if she really wasn't human. What's there to be afraid of? They're all players and should help each other. He licked his lips and laughed, clutching his weapon. He stuck to the girl and said that there was only 5 minutes left until the end of the game. He kept laughing and talking about how they were all scared. Were the two adults planning to protect this little girl? He asked the girl to see how cowardly her comrades were. He asked her to join him instead, since he was the master. Is she really so frightened that she's so silent? The game will soon be over, and he's only 5 points short. Even if points are calculated for killing other races, it doesn't matter. He began to approach her, still laughing terribly, but she looked him in the eyes with great courage. She stood up and pointed her finger in his direction, and her eye glowed with a bright, bloody light. The blonde guy thought she was crazy because she used wild dogs to attack. Could this really be her ability to play house with small animals? Suddenly, his gaze changed, and cold sweat began to trickle down his face. He did not expect such a turn of events, and these dogs, preparing for a fight, rushed towards him. The fair-haired guy started screaming in horror when one of the dogs bit him on the hand. The guy exclaimed that it was simply impossible and that he was already level 6. He had 56 employee kills to his credit. He couldn't understand what was happening and asked what these angry dogs would do to him. His gaze changed, and he began to crawl back. Haoji explained that everything he planned to do to Hinina, they would do to him, which was obvious. The boy began to deny it, saying he hadn't planned to do anything. His priority was helping them. The main character listened attentively to the fair-haired guy and looked at him sternly. The guy kept begging them to let him go and said that if they killed him, they would lose points. They were all human, and their murders were illegal. Haoji remarked that he was well aware of this rule and asked how he knew about it. Perhaps having learned it by killing someone? Hinina remarked that he had said that killing someone of the same race would count against a different race. The fair-haired boy exclaimed that he did not want to die and said that he would definitely improve. He even knelt before them and continued to beg for mercy. The protagonist grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and exclaimed that he was lucky this time. Then the boy began to tearfully thank Haoji, beads of cold sweat glistening on his face. The boy explained what he meant. He had a chance of resurrection. Killing him was too easy a fate. When the fair-haired guy heard this, he was seriously scared, and beads of sweat appeared on his face again. He only asked to wait and said that next time he would ensure his timely death, and that he would not even be buried. Haoji smiled and said that he would wait until the guy killed him. Hinina stood in front of the guys, and around her were angry dogs. Suddenly, she raised her hand up and gave the command to approach the enemy. The guys who participated in the game watched this and closed their eyes in fear. A tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. A savior complex brings nothing but trouble, and he learned that lesson in a previous life. Killing even a member of another race is not easy for him. However, mercy is extended only to those who deserve it. Killing employees, assisting in killing, protecting the weakened players, mentoring new players, and the main character gains a lot of experience for this. The game came to an end, and the system congratulated the Platinum Hunter for surviving the game. The rewards countdown began, and he received a ton of points for completing the base mission. The countdown for additional rewards has begun. For active rescues, you'll receive the title of Assistant. 5 points are awarded for successful mentoring, and you'll receive the title of Role Model. A 2-point reward for deeply understanding the game's prologue is also activated, as is a high-ranking talent. After an opponent's death, you must touch their skin to unlock the skill. A skill of complete duplication, and with skill improvement, its cultivation is possible. Haoji wondered if he should try it. He began to walk towards the dead body of the blonde guy and reach his hand towards his face. Copying the Madness skill at level 5, skill description. It adds the Berserk effect and 5% of that effect. The surviving boys exclaimed that it was finally over. The surviving girl said she almost died. The protagonist reflected on his failure to save everyone one by one. But if the City of the Future is a game, then there are bound to be developers and bosses behind it. He will definitely find these villains and kill them as a sacrifice. Yinpai told the boy she was currently level 7. Besides the base reward of 5 points, she had an additional 3, and she wondered what to do with those points. Hinina informed him that she was level 6, and with the base reward of 5 points, she only had 7 points. Haoji replied that he needed to exchange all his extra points for experience first in the next game, and that there was no need to rush things just yet. Once they logged into the game, the difficulty would be adjusted. They'll use this bug to safely and effectively complete games, earning more rewards. Yinpei smiled and said she'd also gained a new skill. Haoji told the girl that she trusted him too much. Telling everyone about it isn't the best strategy. The rewards are secret skills, and there's no need to tell everyone about them unless they're in the clan. He hadn't expected such luck from the girl. Was the skill a reward at the very beginning of the game? Or was it something else entirely? Perhaps someone was orchestrating everything behind the scenes, and someone had taken a liking to her. Hey! Nina happily inquired about joining the clan and asked if she could join his. Haoji replied that it was quite easy. If she was sure she wanted to join his clan, he would send her an invitation, and she would only have to accept. However, he believed she should be more cautious, and that the clan's strength was crucial, greatly influencing its future development. Yinpei said she wanted to be in his clan, not only because he had helped her, but also because of Zhu Tong. He Ning also said that, despite her weakness, she wanted to join his clan. The main character was in front of a blue monitor screen and began pressing on it with his index finger. It asked whether to create a clan or not. A platinum hunter was inviting girls to join the clan, and the request had to be accepted or rejected. Haoji asked them to hurry, as the amusement park location had been generated, but the police would soon arrive after receiving reports of the attack. If they were caught for questioning, who knows what kind of trouble awaited them. He reflected that people don't yet realize that the game is gradually merging with reality. Some social rules are still observed. What he fears most is the emergence of game missions while they're absent. Now they're members of a clan, and missions can be completed either solo or with the clan. Some missions can only be completed solo, not with a clan. Hinina told the boy that his level was higher than theirs and asked what level determined the difficulty of the mission. The boy replied that if the difference in clan member levels is less than 5, the system automatically selects a mid-level level to determine mission difficulty. For high-level members, this negatively impacts farming experience. However, low-level clan members gain experience faster. Hinina exclaimed that everything was clear and that it was very similar to the game settings and asked what they should do next. Haoji said that game missions often appear early on, so the clan members should work together. Yinpei asked in a slightly frightened tone whether everything would be okay with Wutong. The boy replied that he'd called her on his way back. She hadn't entered the game yet, so there was no reason to fear for her safety right now. Yinpei said that was very good and that she would also call her parents to ask about them. Suddenly, some guy appeared and asked the main character how he could hit on girls behind his back. When the guy hugged the girl, he asked in surprise if he was really courting minors. Haoji replied to his comrade that the two were members of his clan, and asked what the hell he was talking about. Li Hai clutched his head and said that he was just joking, and introduced himself as the protagonist, Li Hai's best friend. He thought his level was incredibly high, especially in such a short time. He was only level 8 and asked him to open the clan invitation and let his daddy in. Haoji replied that he'd told him to read the game instructions, but he didn't listen. That's why his leveling is going so slowly. The guy asked me to stop talking, and said he really wanted to join his clan. Haoji asked him not to squeeze him so hard. The Platinum Hunter invited him to join his clan, and he accepted with a squeeze. Li Hai explained that he was a warrior of the human race, and from now on he would protect the young ladies well. Speaking of which, this game is strange, and after the end, the game's location didn't disappear. Haoji asked if he'd only just realized the game was strange, and if he'd noticed the game world was consuming reality. Li Hai was surprised and said that meant everyone would become players in the future. Haoji said that early on they needed to find ways to level up quickly and earn various rewards. He asked how much time had passed between his 2 missions. When the boy explained that about 2 hours had passed, he understood everything and suggested going out for a bite to eat. They'll rest for a few hours and then start a new game. And now, several hours have passed. Li Hai was very pleased, and clutching his stomach, he exclaimed that he had eaten and drunk well, which meant they were alive. The mission location is the 3rd line of the Zombie Hunt metro station. The objective is to survive again, and the time limit is 8 hours. The reward for this mission is 8 points, and failure also results in 8 points. A zombie virus suddenly appears on a subway station line, and he's one of the passengers. He must try to survive and help as many people as possible. The girls were surprised by the survival mission and were asked to choose a clan. Haoji said this was the clan's first mission and offered to go with them. Zombies were wreaking havoc on the world, so as heroes, they had to destroy as many of them as possible. The mission description gives a hint. Helping people could be the key to additional rewards. The boy thought that this was a zombie instance, and the monsters were most likely between level 6 and 8. Hining's level was quite low for that. He told his comrade that her level was quite low and asked him to protect her. Li Hai told his friend not to worry about it. Hinina was a little upset by her low level and blushed with worry. The girl exclaimed that she would definitely catch up with them, Li Hai told her, calling her little one. That sometimes it wasn't shameful to lean on adults. Then the girl became even more angry and blushed, and began to catch her breath so as not to get even angrier. And now there were only 10 minutes left until the game started. The boy walked up to the machine and inserted a card. When he slid the card in front of him, there were a variety of drinks and snacks. He handed his friend a bottle of water and asked him to bring them. The mission would take 8 hours and there would be no chance of drinking water in the metro. There were only 2 minutes left before the game started. Li Hai asked the girl what was wrong with her face and why it was green. Hinina explained that she was afraid of zombies and that she was hoping not to turn into the Walking Dead. The boy, holding his chin in his hand, said that it would probably be similar and that this is how many perceive zombies. There were 10 seconds left before the game started and the boys were prepared for the unexpected. The guy was holding a suitcase in his hands and was walking in a strange way, after which he threw the suitcase right in front of a speeding commuter train. There was 1 second left until the game began. The guy again began to approach right up to the track along which the electric train was running. A girl appeared behind him holding a child in her arms. She asked the man if he was okay and urged him to be careful. The man continued to stand with his back to her and did not answer the girl, but simply looked into the distance. But suddenly he turned his head and his eyes glowed with a red, bloody light, and a creepy long tongue stuck out of his mouth. The girl was covered in beads of sweat, and when she saw that something was happening to his head, she was very scared. The man turned to face her and began to approach. She asked the gentleman what he was doing and asked him not to approach. But the guy began to approach her as quickly as possible and wanted to attack the girl. He didn't have time to do this because the main character appeared first and blocked his blow with his foot. The zombie flew far, far back, right under the electric train that was rushing very fast, and blood spilled all around the electric train and the railway tracks. Haoji turned to the girl and asked her not to ask why. She just needed to run outside. She immediately obeyed him and, grabbing her child, ran. The boy, watching her, hoped that she would manage to escape. His comrades appeared behind him and Lee-Hi called out to him as he approached. The main character looked closely at his friends and said that the transformation into zombies had begun. The guys expected that the game would begin now and that it would, of course, be no better than the previous one. One of the participants asked what the man had just done and whether someone had been killed. The second exclaimed that it looked like someone had been hit. Why is there a white fog inside, and could it really be disinfectant? Before he could finish speaking, someone started to leave. These were not just people, but bloody zombies that were approaching them. The main character exclaimed, looking at his comrade, that zombies were coming and asked them to get ready. The boys were ready, grabbing their sharp axes and cleavers. The girls were also approaching, eager to attack. The zombies moved faster and faster towards us, and their eyes glowed with a bloody light. Haoji had already killed one of them, and received 400 experience points from this battle. He continued to kill zombies one after another and get more and more experience points. The girls also fought and killed these evil monsters, and He Ning was no slouch, and the animals helped her. People started screaming and calling for help as the zombies were getting closer and closer to them. The gates were closed and the boys started knocking on them, begging to be let out as quickly as possible. They shouted that there were monsters here and again asked to open the door immediately. Had they really gone completely mad? Why did they even close that door? One of the boys turned his head and exclaimed that they were already on their way. The girl also ran away and screamed about the monsters coming with tears in her eyes. Outside, they already know what is happening here, and the metro door is unfortunately locked. In the future, many ordinary people who were unable to escape will most likely be turned into zombies. If the player was turned into a zombie, it would be a huge problem, and they continued to fight. The main character had already killed many zombies and, clutching his neck with his hand, looked closely at what was happening. He decided that it would be better to quickly sort out the trouble so he could meet with Wu Tong. The people outside asked what was going on down there. One of the guys replied that they were talking about monsters. It's definitely true. And hasn't he noticed that something strange has been happening everywhere lately? There's 1 hour left until the end of the game. The main character had already killed many monsters and was standing with his foot on one of them, wiping the sweat from his face. Suddenly, another zombie began to approach him and he heard a noise near his ear. With a deft movement of his hand, he grabbed the monster by the face, pushing him back. The boy knocked the zombie to the floor and began to punch him so hard that blood flew in all directions. Lee-Hi exclaimed that they were killing them one wave after another, but the zombies were still reappearing, and time was still ticking. Yen-Pei mentioned that quite a few players had already been killed. The boy thought about how players had 2 lives, and the first time they died, they didn't turn into zombies like normal people. This eliminates a lot of problems. However, it's quite possible to survive for 8 hours simply by killing regular zombies, and this task is too easy. There needs to be some surprise right before the end. Suddenly, one of the guys exclaimed that their world was coming to an end, and were there really zombies everywhere outside too? Lee-Hi told his bro that he'd probably been watching too many zombie movies, but he was right. And this world really was coming to an end. One of the boys asked if they would protect them. He didn't want to die and didn't want to become a zombie. The other explained that his wife and children were waiting for him at home and he didn't want to die. The girl said she was very scared and asked them to save her. Yen-Pei said that as long as everyone obeyed their commands, they would do everything possible to ensure their safety. She asked everyone to calm down and said the game would end soon. Then one of the guys asked if she really called it a game. The girl replied that it was hard to explain and that they would understand everything later. Then the guy didn't calm down and said that these monsters appeared out of nowhere, and they could fight them. Maybe they were just guinea pigs they'd created. The girl looked at the guy sadly and told the gentleman that he was mistaken, and that this was not true. Haoji told the man that if he was so worried, he could handle it himself and asked the girl to make way for him. The boy then asked what he was saying, and if he had caused this, he should take full responsibility. He turned to the people around him and asked them to support him, because that is exactly how it is. The surrounding guys looked at each other and stared silently at the man. Lee-Hi grinned and told him that it seemed like he was the only one who was crazy. Then the man asked if they weren't afraid that they would be destroyed, and asked them to unite quickly. The girl holding the child in her arms asked if he could protect them then. The boy didn't know what to say and simply stared at them. Haoji explained that a scoundrel like him would sooner or later ruin everything, so that others would not suffer because of him. He needed to leave. He's not cruel though, and if he wants to survive, he just needs to shut up. Then the guy smirked and said he wouldn't mess with him. And with half an hour left in the game, Hanina asked her brother if he'd noticed the zombies seemed to have stopped appearing. The boy replied that this was true, but asked them to remain vigilant. He looked at the monitor to see how many zombies had been killed and how much experience he had earned. The clan had been completing a dungeon, and the experience had been shared. The higher the level, the less experience you get. But there are always zombies here. This is quite convenient, and then you can basically just stand in place and beat these scoundrels. Before he could think this, zombies began to crawl out, destroying the stones around them and pulling out their tongues. They were very creepy, and their eyes glowed with emptiness and blood, and their tongues were long and nasty. The zombies did not look like people, but were healthy and big like green toads. One of the boys exclaimed that this couldn't be happening, and that they were facing an elite monster. The second said that he had no more strength left, and that this was the end for them. The protagonist said this was the last wave, and if they gave up now, they'd waste their chance at survival. Besides, this so-called elite monster was only level 10 and had nothing to fear. Nina exclaimed that this monster was too ugly. Lehigh asked why she was being so personal. The girl replied that she wasn't talking about him, but rather that this fat man was too ugly and that she was scared. Lehigh replied that as long as she didn't scold him, everything was fine. Now, if she was afraid, then she should take her guys and protect everyone. He asked her to leave the big guy in his care. Nina thought that she was useless and also spoke as if she wanted to catch up with everyone. The girl clenched her fist and decided that she had been afraid of zombies since childhood, and tears began to shine in her eyes. The boys decided to attack and took their weapons to confront the evil zombies. In front of them was a giant glutton zombie, and it was truly an elite monster. He approached the others and began to bite off their heads, and a lot of blood flew in different directions. The guys noticed that this monster absorbs its own kind. Could there really be such a mechanic in the dungeon? The system told the Platinum Hunter that the giant could not be allowed to continue its acquisition, and that it was necessary to look at the rapidly growing indicators. It turns out the system panel can be used this way, but my friend exclaimed that now wasn't the time to study the panel. Lehigh said he'd go find a player who knows how to use fire and they'd burn everything down. How'd you ask them to act separately? His comrade asked who had fire-based attack skills. One of the guys with glasses who was holding a phone in his hand said that he chose the fire mage. Lehigh explained that all corpses, whether human or zombie, needed to be burned to ashes. He asked the boy if he understood, and he replied that the burning would take a long time. Then Lehigh asked if they couldn't see that this giant raised his level when he ate. He began to kill one after another, and approaching the giant, he asked who else could fight him. One of the guys asked who he was. The other replied that he didn't know, but he was pretty cool and decided to go. The comrade asked if they could definitely stand up to the boss, and they didn't know what to do, while the guy was already approaching the fat man. The creepy, evil monster had already reached out his hand to the boy when the main character appeared behind him. When he hit him on the head with his fist, he exclaimed in frustration that he was not falling, and that he needed to break through the defense first. Lehigh smiled and told his comrade that breaking through defense was his signature skill. Lehigh had a new relationship with women, and it was quite a positive one. He was very self-confident, and all his stats had improved. He had already approached the monster and hit him with all his might with his weapon. The condition also increases stats, and his dungeon experience is off the charts. His friends asked if this was a nickname for a woman's friend. Lehigh asked why it was impossible, and at first he thought that it would be possible to change it. So he came up with something at random. The protagonist told the women's friend to beware of the boss's skills. Lehigh asked if he could stop shouting his nickname so loudly. Hauji smiled and answered the women's friend that it was good, and he understood him, making his comrade even more angry. Meanwhile, the evil green monster was already approaching them and destroying everything in its path. The stones flew in all directions, and Lehigh jumped into the air and barely dodged the blow. He exclaimed that it was so easy to break through the defense and immediately laughed. The basics of dungeon crawling: breaking armor, dealing damage, focusing attacks on the boss. Didn't they play games? The system asked them to stop chatting and focus on the main goal of killing monsters and leveling up. The boys began to attack this evil monster again and hit him from all sides. Suddenly, the green monster grabbed one of the boys and hit him with all his might on the rocks. The guy with glasses said that he wouldn't have time because there were too many corpses. The protagonist asked Yunpei to hit this monster on the neck and explained that that was its weak spot. Then the girl turned towards the boy and asked what kind of nonsense this was, and the boy smiled and said that he had forgotten her nickname. The girl began to approach the evil monster faster and faster to strike. She was already close to his head, and the monster's eyes glowed with a bright, bloody light. Yunpei was already near his head and clenched her fists as she approached him closely. There was a powerful flash of golden light as she struck him in the neck with her elbow. Suddenly, the monster actually staggered and fell face down on the rocks. The girl turned in his direction and, smiling, told the Platinum Hunter that her name was Batsy. Then the boy replied that he would definitely remember her nickname from now on. And now there was only 1 minute left until the dungeon's end. Lehigh did not let go of his axe and said that he had almost no strength left. There were already several healthy, huge zombies, and they were approaching them faster and faster. The main character said that they had almost completed the dungeon. The long dungeon has been cleared and the long dungeon results are being calculated, and the data is being analyzed. Experience exchange. 7 points were spent, 7,000 experience was received, and 105 zombies were killed. Experience gained was 30,500. The protagonist looked closely at the table and thought that everything was faster than in his past life. And he had reached level 20 and now he could choose dungeons himself. Next, you need to farm only in dungeons where key items can drop, which will definitely allow you to break away from others. Information advantage is the most powerful weapon. The boy earned the title of strategist for his decisive command and received a 4-point reward for it. His second talent began to be used. Touching an enemy grants an ability, and the boss literally counts as an enemy. So he decided to try it on the fat guy. Haoji gained the explosion skill, which causes corpses to explode, with a blast radius of 1.5 meters. This skill for clearing out groups of monsters is simply divine. Just kill one, throw it into a crowd of monsters, and it creates a chain reaction of explosions. The boy decided that this was quite a good result. Lehigh said that everything was already over and why they still haven't come out. Haoji explained that the main entrance was definitely surrounded by staff and police, and if they went out there, they would definitely be stopped for questioning, and it would be better to go through the tunnel. The girls asked the main character if he knew the way, and he replied that he didn't. Lehigh said he hoped it wouldn't be the case that they hadn't even left yet, and the dungeon had already updated. Haoji replied that it wouldn't happen that quickly. The tunnel will definitely lead to the next station, where you can immediately transfer to another line and get off. What's the next station on line 4, and what's its name? Hinina turned to the protagonist and said that this was Nanjing Station. Haoji told the girl that this road was good, then she asked what was on it. The boys were traveling by train, and Haoji asked what level they were at now. When everyone told her level, Hinina said, upset, that she was only level 15. The boy asked Yanpei to go to the hospital first and wait for him there. He was afraid Wu Tong would see the news and worry, and he would come immediately after the dungeon. Haoji asked his friend to take her and told him to go straight to the dorm afterward. Lehigh asked him what he was planning. Then the main character explained to his friend that he wanted to farm dungeons alone. Lehigh was very surprised and asked if the system shouldn't give out tasks. Haoji explained that after level 20, some dungeons become accessible to independent players. He needed to wait until he'd maxed out the clan dungeons, while they simply had to wait for him to level up. Lehigh was very surprised that he was already at such a high level. Haoji said that this is what happens when you don't keep an eye on the big picture, and he asked them to expect good news from him. In front of us is one of the shopping centers on Nanjing Road. The boy said that he remembers, you come out of the sheet and on the left is the cleaner's room. This is the hidden dungeon, and he quickly began to open the door to the corridor. An 18th level dungeon, the territory of the Ice Wolves. The experience from a single monster is small, but groups of monsters will spread quickly. You just need to mow non-stop, and before the end of the dungeon, you can farm a ton of experience and drops. The boy moved faster and further through the cold snow and saw snow-white wolves in front of him. He had a steel dagger in his hand, sharp and powerful, and 1 point for it. He jumped as high as he could and began to use the assassin class talent, Hidden Device. He had already approached one of the snow-white wolves and it looked at him with fear. The boy pulled out his sharp knife and stabbed the wolf in the neck with all his might. When one of the wolves fell into the snow, the others looked at him in fear and began to run away. The main character stopped in front of them and, smiling, asked them not to rush to leave. The wolves began to approach him to protect themselves, and their snow-white fangs sparkled as brightly as the snow. The boy looked at them with a smile and waited for an attack so he could deal with them as soon as possible. He put his hand forward and started using the explosion method as quickly as possible. Indeed, there was a powerful explosion and bright rays of fire sparkled around the dead wolf and everyone else. The explosion caused the wolves to jump high into the air and scatter in different directions. Haoji has already killed many animals and more and gained a lot of experience points. He looked closely at the table and saw an incredible number of points. It was as if there was a blue road in front of him and he continued to kill. Only the screams and growls of the snow-white wolves could be heard, as they fell bloodied down onto the white snow. The boy gained more and more experience points and continued to kill animals. The snow turned bloody white with each kill, and the boy captured targets one after another. There was another huge explosion when the boy waved his hand to the side. The explosion was simply incredible and stones began to fly in different directions, jumping up. Several hours had passed and the protagonist looked closely at the table. He had accumulated a ton of points and experience and his level had risen to 26. The timer was set for 1 hour and the boss had already appeared. The boy was waiting. In front of him stood a huge, beautiful leader of the pack, the alpha wolf, snow white and powerful. The protagonist spread his arms wide and exclaimed in anticipation that he had arrived just in time. He began using the secret dragon race. Today he came here for 2 reasons. Firstly, to farm experience, and secondly, no one bothers him here. He approached the huge wolf and exclaimed that he couldn't wait to level up. The main character began to use the dragon race, after which all characteristics doubled. And now the huge leader of the wolves was already fighting his opponent more and more, treacherously and cruelly. The boy dealt blow after blow and finally got as close to the wolf as possible. He delivered the final crushing blow, and it fell over onto a powerful icy cliff. The protagonist approached the dead wolf and was glad that the dragon race was downright imbai. The system tells him that he has a dragon bloodstone, but no matter how much he searches, it is nowhere to be found. So what is the matter? The raid on the huge ice wolf was completed successfully, the system told him so. The rewards began to be tallied and he received a rare scroll, bonus points, and a character level of 26. Haoji was surprised that he'd failed him once without even leveling up, calling him a weakling. The boy decided to use his copying talent and gained the Ice Howl skill. It emits high-frequency sound waves filled with ice energy, slowing enemies within a 15-meter radius. This skill can also be upgraded. He also gained Shadow Trace, and if his class is Assassin, the skill is automatically integrated as a passive skill. While active, he has a chance to completely hide and temporarily increases his evasion. Haoji exclaimed that this was exactly what he needed, and that he had to stop farming and return to the hospital. And now the boy was already in the hospital and opened the door to the room where the girl was lying. Yinpei was also already there and greeted the main character, and his sister called him brother. The boy looked closely at the girl and tears sparkled in his eyes. He immediately ran to her and hugged her, saying that his older brother was late. The girl said that he had been to see her recently. The boy asked her if it hurt when he hugged her, and the girl happily answered that of course not. He asked Yinpei if she had told Wutong about what was happening. She replied that she had told him only a little. Wutong said that she didn't believe it at first, but Yinpei didn't deceive her, so she basically understood. The main character approached the girl and said that this time her brother would definitely save her.